Hey everyone, and welcome to another video series about Cpanel. This one we are going to be talking about using LiteSpeed as a replacement for Apache. Now the install configuration is pretty simple. The first thing you want to do is you want to go to the product's web server to download LiteSpeed. The quick thing is we have two different editions. We've got Standard and Enterprise. Standard, you can only be able to run 5 vhosts. That's within the Cpanel GUI setup configuration, or if you use the Apache config file. Either one, you can only be allowed to use 5. There's some other differences as well, such as DOS protection, multiprocessor, some performance things, and along with some other things too. But if you're going to be like hosting actual websites, you're going to want to actually make sure you purchase the enterprise one. Here we go. The pricing is a little expensive, so you have to factor that in. But I'm just here to show you how to install it. But if you want to go ahead and buy it, you can just go ahead and buy it. Recommend. It really depends on how many sites you have. I mean, if you're going to host a lot of websites, you're really going to want to make sure you upgrade to like the higher ends. Otherwise, you're going to be straining the one CPU and you only going to have that one process that's handling all the connections. So if you have like a one CPU license, you only have that one CPU, that one process that's dealing with all the incoming requests, and you can bottleneck really quickly. So you really would probably want to consider upgrading depending on how many websites you have to get better performance increases. So just one of the things you want to keep in mind on that. Okay, so I want to go ahead and download and install it. Alright, what we've done is we went ahead and we got whatever the file we extracted. We also got the key. You have to make sure you copy the key into the directory, which we went ahead and did. So when you install it, you're going to get the Enterprise Edition. Otherwise, you're going to end up getting the Standard. So to install, this will also automatically install the Cpanel plugin. It's going to detect that you have Cpanel, and it's going to install. So we're going to type yes. Destination's fine. We've already installed it, so we're going to go ahead and just do a reinstall. Admin, give it simple password. You can set the email address, and right here is what I was talking about. You can choose which control panel you have. We chose Cpanel. Now, what this does is allows you to run Cpanel off of, say, maybe port 81, 88, whatever, so you can test it and make sure it runs, and then replace Apache. But right now, what we're just going to do is we're going to go ahead and put it on port 80. So we want to make sure we set this to 0 so there's no offsetting. I mean, if we left the default, which is 2000, we'd be running on port 2080, but we don't want to have Apache, so we're going to do that. And we're going to go ahead and configure PHP for SUI XDC, and we're going to go ahead and leave it with option 2. It's going to install. Would you like to start it? Yes. And yes. And right here it tells you how to completely disable Apache, which I believe we've already done that. So we're just going to double check and make sure we have it off, which I'm pretty sure we do. And let's just run it real quick here. And there we go, we've got LiteSpeed running. As you can tell, we don't have Apache running in any way, which is really good. Now let's just go ahead and do a netstat and do a confirmation. Okay, so we're good. We've got it running, and let's just go ahead and check to see what we've got. And should be able to get the headers and see that we have LiteSpeed running. We'll just grab the IP. Checking, and there we go. We've got it. It is running LiteSpeed. Okay, so let's talk about using the LiteSpeed GUI. By default, sorry about that. Let's grab the IP again. By default, LiteSpeed is going to run on port 7080. You can change that if you like, but by default it is going to be on 7080. I'm going to go ahead and type in and log in here. Okay. So this is what the LiteSpeed GUI interface looks like. You really are not going to do too much with this because we're pulling in the Apache config file. Scroll down here. So what it does when we set Cpanel is we went ahead and selected Cpanel in the configuration. So it went ahead and changed all this and set it up to use the the Cpanel setup. So this right here is the Apache binary, but it gets replaced with a LiteSpeed binary. I'll show you here real quick. So this, typically what would usually be the Apache one, is now replaced and it's using LiteSpeed. So this is the original Apache binary, but it got replaced with with LiteSpeed. So that's the trick there. So it's following. So as far as Cpanel is concerned, it's still running Apache. Cpanel doesn't really know the difference. It's just using the default locations, and LiteSpeed just overrides it with its own stuff. Now, if you wanted to, you can edit this, and you can change the different ways on how it runs. So if you wanted to, you can do that. But the defaults are typically just fine. Under the log here, we can choose logs. It's going to use the exact same locations for Apache. This right here is the tuning. You can actually tune this. Just real quickly, I recommend just using ePoll. If you have like a dedicated SSL encryption decryption for hardware, you can use that. Otherwise, it's just going to use the built-in. You can actually change this, synchronize, disk I/O. You can choose the size. As far as like tuning all these things, it really depends. Just typically just max these out. Save that. But it really depends how you want to do things. We can also take this. We can set gzip to like 9 because we got a lot of CPU power. Why not? We'll just use it all. One other little tweak here we can do. Just go ahead and take this, take the application, and just gzip all the application stuff. That's fine. Security. You can set the requests per second coming in, and you can also set the bandwidth for the connections. You can also set the connection soft limit, and then if they pass that, the hard limit is the maximum hits, the maximum connections. They cannot go past that. If they go past the soft limit, they have this much time, 15 seconds, to go under the soft limit. If they do not, they get banned for about 5 minutes. So that's basically a quick way to help mitigate some denial of service-based attacks. We also have the external application resource controls here. Now the request filter works a lot like mod security. However, since we have mod security loaded in through the Apache config file, it's just going to go ahead and pull that. So we're not going to use this. It's a nice little GUI interface, but we're not using it. We're using it from within the Apache config file. Now this here is the caching system, so we can set a storage path. You could either use like say a RAM disk, or we could actually use like an SSD or something in like a RAID 0, because we really want something fast. We want something that's going to be quick and easy to grab and read write. So an SSD would be ideal, or a RAID 0 disk with like 15Ks, something like that. Now we also have the cache policy. We can actually configure this. Do we want to request cache the request with a cookie, a query string? So we can just set all this to yes and just cache everything. It's like, okay, enable the cache. We'll keep it for like say 30 minutes. As you can see, we can do private caching, keep stuff based on the IP. Say private cache. We'll just give it say like an hour. Just go ahead and save that. We can have like a do not cache domain, so we can set stuff like that. We have the external application. Let's see here. This would be for the PHP 5 binary, so we can go ahead and set that as well. We have the script handler here, and we're saying okay. If it's got an extension of PHP 5 or PHP, we're going to go ahead and use the LiteSpeed 5 PHP edition, which is configured here. It's like there's the binary, so we can configure that. As far as the listeners, virtual host templates go, we will not be using that. That is if you're using LiteSpeed as itself and you're not using the Apache or actually the Apache config file. So we're not going to really touch that, but if you were using this as the Apache config file to actually set up the listeners, virtual hosts, and stuff like that, that's going to be for another video for those who want to actually use LiteSpeed, without like a control panel. You would use that. Otherwise, the only thing you're going to be using is going to be the server tab with Apache and Cpanel, or for actually any control panel for that matter. These three were just not going to be used. So that was all under the server tab. Web configuration, the web console. This is for the Apache. This is for the administrator side. We have the timeout, the security here. We can set up different users' accounts, and we can also change the IP it's listening to and the port number, and we can also make an SSL if we want. So the web console is just going to be for the helping and setting up the admin. We can choose apply changes, and we'll just go ahead and apply them. Just did the graceful restart right there. It's loading, and it's completely saved. So as we can tell, we've already seen it's actually loaded up the listeners from the Apache config file, so it's loading them up. So there's really nothing much to it. As you can see, it's got some issues with one of the mod security rewrite config files, so we'll have to look into that and fix that. It might just be a little mishap. I don't know exactly what version of mod security we have. LiteSpeed does a pretty good job of actually being able to run the latest edition of mod security, but sometimes I don't know exactly what version of mod security we've got installed right now. I think LiteSpeed right now only supports up to 2.5 or something. I don't know exactly. You have to actually check that out, but that's just one thing to keep in mind. But it is in fact loading, so that's pretty much all there is to it to actually running LiteSpeed. We can also change the priority. I forgot to mention that. You can change that if you're running Cloud Linux. You want to make sure you set that. You can also change the ID if you're running as something else too, and you can change the host name. We can also check for daily updates, download the updates, use the client IP in the header. We can choose to hide that version, or we can actually show the full header. Use the IP in the geo. So we've got all these abilities to configure, but most of it's pretty simple. You can just see the defaults actually, but if you really want to do some advanced setting, you can also do the Apache style configurations down here. But really, you can just pretty much just leave all this. It's so simple just to install. Just to show you, it actually does create the plugin right here, which is LiteSpeed Web Server plugin. So we can build a matching PHP binary. We can restart LiteSpeed configuration. We're running the trial license, so we can check and do a refresh. We can change the license. We can switch back to Apache or switch back to LiteSpeed still. You've got your options right there, so it gives you a lot of flexibility. So it's not really bad. And from someone who's actually been using this since like the days of LiteSpeed version 2, they've made a lot of headway over the years, and they've gotten a lot better. So it's definitely a good option if you want to put the extra money into it, but there's really nothing to it. Installing LiteSpeed is pretty simple, so hopefully that helps you, and if you've got questions, let us know. And stay tuned for the next videos. Make sure you subscribe and like us on Facebook and Twitter.